Hello, everybody, and welcome to the XCEL Physical Therapy Podcast. I'm Robbie. I'm hosting today, and I'm going to talk to you about caffeine, what it does to your body, what it does to your brain, and actually how it affects your recovery as well. So, there's a couple points I want to hit on. I have a few notes here with me that I'll be referencing throughout this short little podcast. I try to keep it around 5 to 10 minutes. I don't want to turn it into like a biology episode where we're talking about all the different chemicals that break down in our body when we have caffeine, when we consume caffeine, how it affects our sleep cycle. But I do want to make it to where it's easy to understand and you can maybe take something away from this little video here. Interestingly enough, caffeine is the most widely used psychoactive substance in the world. There's nothing that tops that. We're going to talk about what it actually does to your body. Can it be beneficial? Can it be harmful? There are several studies that I'll kind of briefly reference in here. But I want to first talk about what caffeine actually does. So people think about caffeine as giving them a boost of energy, but it's not technically what caffeine is doing inside of our body. It's actually blocking fatigue. It works by blocking the adenosine receptors in the brain, and that's the chemical that builds up the longer you're awake. So as the day passes on, those chemicals build up in our body and in our brain to tell us, hey, it's time to start getting ready for bed. We're getting tired now. We need to start winding down our day. And what caffeine does is it blocks that signal from getting through. And that explains why we get a crash later on if we do drink coffee or an energy drink or something with caffeine. Even decaf coffee can work this way. But it blocks that signal. So it's not uncommon for people that drink coffee or drink a caffeinated drink, energy drink, that maybe later in the afternoon they feel like they crash because there's almost like an overflow of that chemical rushing in saying, hey, we haven't been producing enough of these throughout the day. We've been blocked, and now there's a flood coming through, and you crash and get really tired, really sleepy, really fast, whether it's soda, coffee, or an energy drink of some sort. The research shows that neuroscience and behavioral reviews published in 2010 that showed that this actually happens every time you eat or drink something with caffeine in it. There's also a reference to how long it takes for caffeine to peak, and it's usually about 45 to 60 minutes after ingesting or after consumption, and it blocks both the A1 and A2A adenosine receptors. There's also research that shows why some people do really well with caffeine and some people really struggle with it. And this might relate to something you've experienced yourself. So not everybody metabolizes caffeine in the same way, and that's largely due to the genetics involving the enzymes in your body. And without getting into too much detail, there's one called the CYP1A2 enzyme that helps metabolize or break down caffeine. There was an article published in Sports Medicine in 2016 that showed the genetic differences strongly influence how people respond to caffeine. A study done in 2010 called Sleep also identified genetic differences that make some people more prone to caffeine-induced sleep disruptions. So you and I can have the same cup of coffee or the same energy drink, same amount of caffeine, and I might respond totally different than you do. I might get shaky or jittery, and it might even calm you down. So it all depends on your biology and how it affects you, how your body breaks it down, how your body metabolizes that amount of caffeine. Caffeine has shown some benefits with performance if you use it strategically, mostly in endurance athletes. Doherty and Smith in the Journal of Applied Physiology in 2005 reported that caffeine improves endurance performance by lowering perceived effort. So the amount of energy you feel like you're exuding or putting forth is actually lower in your mind than what you're doing. So an example would be if you were going to run 2 miles, if you had some caffeine beforehand, and some people that metabolize caffeine efficiently, they might have the same responses if they felt like maybe they ran half a mile to a mile. So the difference there is that it has a benefit in you feel like you can do more without pushing yourself harder. There was also a study in the British Journal of Sports Medicine as recently as 2020 that confirmed caffeine can improve strength, power, and endurance in a similar mechanism. It's saying that the perceived amount of effort you're putting forth is less than maybe what you actually are doing. About 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight can improve endurance by 3 to 5% and strength performance by 2 to 4%, with cognitive skills improved by up to 15%. So the ability for the brain to turn on, focus, reflexes, and identifying different areas of, strengths and weaknesses in yourself and what you need to do to emphasize that. Caffeine's benefits aren't just about wakefulness, which is what a lot of people refer to caffeine use for. Is they're like, oh, I feel tired, I feel groggy, maybe I need a little bit of caffeine, whether it's coffee, a soda, energy drink, whatever. And it's not, the benefits aren't just for blocking those receptors like we mentioned earlier that prolong the feeling of being tired. Regular caffeine intake is also associated in some studies of lowering the risk by 30 to 37% of neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. And I'll see if I can't find the PDF to share with that in the show notes. And the way it does that is they're thinking it preserves mitochondrial function in the dopamine neuron. So again, I don't want to get too wordy with the biology terms, but those specifically are important for movement and memory. And we know that staying active, being involved in different things, whether it's in the community or exercise, even things like crossword puzzles, can all help with those same areas of the brain. And caffeine seems to do that as well in these studies. It also can boost attention, working memory, and reaction times by about 10 to 15% at moderate doses. So we're not even talking high level doses, just a small amount, which usually comes around 2 cups of coffee. Or if you want to say that a cup of coffee is about 80 milligrams of caffeine, so let's say 140 to 160 milligrams of caffeine can show a boost in those specific areas: attention, working memory, and reaction time, which help lower the risk of issues like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Now, it's important to note that these are associations. When they do these kind of studies, they do it on like 16,000 to 25,000 people. Sometimes you're talking a huge group, but they're comparing that to people that are getting less than that amount of caffeine. So either no caffeine or maybe 50 milligrams of caffeine, 100 milligrams of caffeine, but they can't compare each person to themselves without that. So if I were to be involved in a study myself, all I get is the results of me, myself on, let's say 150 milligrams of caffeine, but I don't have the same results of me without that caffeine on that given day, that given time, on that given test. So it's important to note that when they do these studies, they're just associating it as best as they can. But like I said, it does seem to show some correlation there, how it can reduce the risks of some of those big time issues like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's by improving attention, focus, memory, and reaction time. Now, there is a trade-off to something like this. It's going to affect your sleep, or it can affect your sleep. Dosing matters and time of day matters when it comes to caffeine. I would say that caffeine's probably most underestimated effect is how it affects our sleep cycle by affecting our circadian rhythm. A study done in the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine in 2013 by Drake showed that caffeine taken even 6 hours before bedtime can significantly reduce sleep quality. Now, by bedtime, they're meaning like what your normal cycle is. If you normally go to bed at 10 o'clock, so 6 hours before that. If you normally lay down at 8 o'clock, midnight, it's different for each person. But roughly 6 hours or less is going to affect your sleep cycle pretty significantly, or can. There's another sleep medicine review in 2008 that found caffeine reduces slow wave sleep, which is what we would call the most restorative stage. That's when your body is healing maybe more efficiently than at different cycles of your sleep. And then another study showed that caffeine's half-life is about 6 hours, meaning half of what you drink is still active in your body 6 hours later. So you can imagine then if you drink some coffee at, let's say your bedtime is 10 o'clock at night, is when you normally go to lay down. If you have a drink at 4 o'clock or later, you still have at least that caffeine, half that caffeine in your body, in your system, working to block those receptors that we mentioned very early on from coming in and telling your body, hey, it's time to start laying down. We need to get ready for bed. It's time to start shutting things off in the system and allow us to get some restful sleep. Now, there's another avenue when we talk about tolerance and dependence. We all know people that, and maybe you yourself or me, myself even, if I go a prolonged amount of time without some kind of caffeine, maybe I have a little bit of a headache, or I feel like I need just a little bit of something to help get the headache to go away. That is not uncommon. That's fairly typical for people that have built up a tolerance to caffeine intake. But unlike some of the other drugs that you hear about all the time in the news, cocaine, nicotine, caffeine doesn't produce an addiction type effect, but it becomes a physical dependence can develop from prolonged exposure. A study in 2012 explains that caffeine can cause dependence and tolerance, meaning you may need more time to get the same effect, but it's not addictive by the terms of medical definition. And I feel like that's pretty typical for a lot of people. If you drink coffee every single day and then you go, let's say 4, 5, 6 days in a row without any kind of caffeine in your body, you might develop a headache. Maybe soda is how you get your caffeine. And if you drink a soda a day, 2 sodas a day, and then you have a day or two without, and then you start noticing you're having a little bit of a headache, what I would tell you is try drinking some water first and see if that helps. But you might just need a little bit of caffeine to help get things working again, and get your cognition, your brain waves turned on again, and improve your focus levels. Then it starts getting into how much caffeine should we have. Caffeine amounts will vary widely based on the beverage that you're drinking. An 8-ounce cup of coffee can have anywhere from 60 to 80 milligrams of caffeine to up to 100 or to 200 milligrams of caffeine. Brewed tea varies anywhere from 40 to 120 milligrams. Most sodas fall in the 20 to 40 milligrams of caffeine area. Energy drinks are all over the board. I've seen some that fall around 60 to 70 milligrams of caffeine. I've seen some that are like crazy, like 300, 400 milligrams of caffeine. I feel like that's borderline insane to have that much caffeine in a drink. I have heard some neuroscientists talk about how much caffeine is actually good for our body and good for our brain. And they claim that anything above 200 in a day is exceeding what your body can efficiently use. So if you were to envision like some of those caffeinated drinks that have 200 milligrams of caffeine, they would say that if you were to drink one of those, you've peaked down on what your body is using efficiently, and now anything beyond that is like putting your foot on the gas pedal, but not going any faster. So you're asking more out of your body, more out of your brain to get to that next level. Maybe whether it's trying to focus for a test, or maybe a meeting you have coming up, maybe it's a presentation you have to give, maybe you have to record a podcast, and you're thinking, hey, I'll just load up on some caffeine before this and be ready to go. Once you get past that level, now, like I said earlier, it's different for everybody. People metabolize it different. What might be good for me at 200 milligrams might be good for you at 160, might be good for somebody else at 250. But essentially, on average, most people peak out the benefits around 200 milligrams of caffeine in a day. A lot of your health authorities will say that, you don't want to go above 400 milligrams of caffeine a day for most adults, because that will increase anxiety, it'll increase sleep issues, and it can have other side effects as well. Let's get to the bottom line here. Caffeine can do a lot of really good things. There's a lot of studies that show it helps with, like I mentioned earlier, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, cognition, attention, memory, focus. But there is a downside that if we start affecting our sleep, it can be a real negative. It can enhance performance. It can boost your focus. It can improve endurance and strength training, and as well as memory if you use it strategically. I will say that most studies will say if you take caffeine within the first 60 to 90, maybe 2 hours of awaking, that's when you're going to see the biggest benefits. Anything after basically noon, 1, 2 o'clock, that's when you start running into that dangerous territory of maybe I'm having it too late in the day. If you have a traditional schedule now, if you work night shift, that varies things a little bit, right? If your body metabolizes at a different rate, that changes things a little bit. But in general terms, caffeine after 1 or 2 o'clock is typically not a good idea, especially in a large amount or large quantity. Use it as a tool. That's essentially what it is. It's powerful when used correctly, but it can be a problem when you're using it to reach a baseline or your default setting. We know that our body heals the most at night when we're sleeping and we're going into the deep sleep or REM sleep, REM sleep. and caffeine directly affects that as well by blocking those receptors from slowly kicking in throughout the day. Like I said, most studies will say early in the morning is good, but you could even have like late morning if you're somebody that metabolizes at a different rate. I know I personally will have some caffeine more like a mid morning, and that seems to work well for me. That's typically when I feel like I maybe need it. I don't know if that's always true, but I'd also like to say that a lot of the research I did before doing this podcast says it's good to also have some take from caffeine for a day or two here and there because it helps reset the system a little bit. So if on a typical work week, let's say you have a couple cups of coffee in the morning on, let's say, Monday and Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, skip a day, and then have another one Thursday, Friday, maybe skip a day of the weekend to try to reset those receptors and enzymes in the brain that build up that tell your body when it's time to start resting and winding down. A few people I've talked to about this topic have mentioned how they feel like in the afternoon they need a little bit of something to help get them through the afternoon, and I would say that's okay, but you also want to make sure you're monitoring how much you're getting. You don't want to get a high dosage in the afternoon because it will start affecting your sleep cycle as quickly as that same night, that same evening. So you want to be cognizant of that because nothing caffeine does for you can outweigh the benefits of a good night's sleep. And that might be a topic we do in the future on the XCEL podcast, talking about sleep quality, how to get good sleep, how your body repairs when you're sleeping. And you can tie that in with this episode. If you have any questions about anything, please reach out, let us know. We'd be happy to discuss further. There's obviously more to this if you really want to break it down to the cellular level, and we can do that. But I'm thinking about my mom who's probably going to be watching this, and she wouldn't care for that. So I tried to make it a little more quick notes and just general topics that are easy to follow. Biggest takeaways: it's okay to have caffeine. It can be good for you. Too much can cause problems. Too late in the day can cause problems. And that's the biggest takeaway I can give you. Thank you guys for listening. Comment in the comment section or reach out to us here at XCEL Physical Therapy, either at Quincy, Illinois or Hannibal, Missouri, and we will be happy to help you with anything going forward.